this evening, Mary Carter Flanagan. Thank you, Mary. You have the floor.
Thank you, Cosmo. Hello, everyone. I am Mary Carter Flanagan. For those of you who may not know me, I grew up in Garden City and I graduated from the high school, Garden City High School, in 1986. In 1998, my husband and I moved back here to raise our family. I've lived in Garden City a total of 43 years, and my three children all graduated from Garden City High School. Emily was 2015, Matt 2018, and Caroline in 2020. Since 2012, I've served as an administrative law judge for the New York State Workers' Compensation Board, where I preside over hearings addressing all issues in workers' compensation cases. I graduated from the University of Virginia in 1990 and St. John's Law School in 1993. After law school, I lived in Washington, D.C. for a couple of years, where I served as a law clerk for a judge in the United States Department of Labor. Upon returning to New York and before becoming a judge, I served as an assistant corporation counsel for the New York City Law Department, and I worked in private practice handling litigation matters. During the 22 years I've been living in Garden City, as an adult, I've volunteered in a variety of different areas. I was involved in the Garden City Nursery School, which is a cooperative nursery school that my three children went to and I went to many years ago. I volunteered on different committees there and served as the vice president of fundraising one year and the president of the nursery school the following year. As my children grew older, I spent many years coaching girls' youth lacrosse in town. I also helped out assisting coaching travel soccer for girls. I was the Girl Scout leader for both of my daughter's troops. In 2007, I co-chaired Garden City's first Cinco de Mayo fiesta for Fanconi anemia. And I was actively involved in that organization's subsequent fiestas as well. And we raised a lot of money to benefit Fanconi Anemia Research Fund. How I came to be involved in FABGC. I have seen stories over the past 5 years or so that have concerned me, as many of you probably have in the Garden City News. But like everyone, you like to think that the volunteers, you want to think the best of your volunteer trustees. So I did not think too much about those stories. Last summer, I read the article in the Garden City News by Brian Donnie about the casino, and I found it troubling. And it really raised my awareness as to what was going on with our village government. It was really a combination of an arrogance, ignorance about the casino, and a complete disregard for a longstanding community institution. It made me realize, as a soon-to-be empty nester, I should try to get involved more in local government, as we seem to need more people getting involved. It wasn't though until I showed up at a Western Property Owners Association meeting that I realized how critical the situation was here in our town, and that's what propelled me to get involved with FABGC. I live in the Western section, and word had gotten out that the Board of Trustees intended to demolish the firehouse and build a $10 million replacement. That was getting a lot of people's attention, and I went to a meeting where the Western Property Owners Firehouse Committee was presenting an alternate plan. At the meeting, I asked the trustee from the Western section what I thought was a simple and straightforward question. I asked what was the process that led the Board of Trustees to hire PCAD, the design firm that was proposing demolition of the 90-year-old building and drawing up plans for a new building that would cost $10 million. I did not get an answer from the trustee, although this trustee appeared to be spearheading the project. I was told in response that it was a multi-step process. I then asked, could you tell me at least one of the steps of the multi-step process? And I didn't even get that information. I was told that he would get that information to me, and that was September 30th. I never got it. Followed up with Village Hall, And it appears there may not have been any public process at all or any public deliberations regarding a decision to hire PCAD at the cost of at least $342,000 in taxpayer money. It seems no other firms were even considered. And it seems that PCAD was going forward with plans that include demolition. I love Garden City, and like so many others, I'm deeply concerned about the board's lack of transparency and the lack of any community involvement in the board's decisions. I'm honored to be a FABGC candidate for the Board of Trustees. And I will turn it over. We're happy to answer all your questions. But before we get to that, I'll turn it over to Bruce Chester, who is our trustee candidate from the estate section.
Good evening. My name is Bruce Chester. I live on 220 Kensington Road, about 6 houses from the Long Island Railroad. My wife Patty and I have lived here for 22 years. We raised 4 kids here. All went through the excellent Garden City school system. The oldest graduating in 2006, the youngest graduating in, the oldest graduating in 2002, and the youngest graduating in 2013. Both my wife and I have been active in the town. My wife attended many Board of Education meetings, particularly, of course, when our kids were in the school, as well as Girl Scout meetings. I was involved in the Boy Scouts for our one son who was active in it. And I coached Garden City Centennial Soccer for a number of years, which was a lot of fun. I've been an insurance professional for 45 years. After graduating from Villanova University in 1975, I went to work for the Travelers Insurance Company in New York City. After several years, I joined the Chester Insurance Agency in Carr Place, and I eventually became its president in 1990. As an independent insurance agency, Chester Agency sold all forms of insurance: auto, homeowner, business, life, health, the works. It's never easy running a business. Certainly wasn't for me, but I was able to keep it profitable. I always watched our expenses as opposed to our revenues, and that's what I did throughout the whole period of time. I've insured a number of municipalities over the course of the years: fire departments, water districts, a volunteer ambulance corps, school district, and a country club. I've seen numerous lawsuits that can arise related to these entities. And I strongly believe in minimizing risk, and certainly try to minimize risk with our village. I do not write any insurance for the village, and I will not if I'm fortunate enough to be elected to the Board of Trustees. I will, however, provide as much advice on insurance issues as is needed. I've been also involved in civic and religious organizations, and as well as my professional organization. I was president of the Tri-County Independent Agents Association, which encompasses about 500 agents, Brooklyn, Queens, and Nassau, and I received an award from them as Insurance Person of the Year, and also from the Downstate Insurance Council, which encompasses about 700 or 800 agents, and I got Insurance Executive of the Year. The civic associations, local civic associations, I've been asked to lecture on insurance issue numerous times. I've been a member of service clubs such as Kiwanis and the Lions helps out the blind. We've raised quite a bit of money for them, and during the course of my membership. I'm currently serving as the Grand Knight of Corpus Christi Council number 2502. As Grand Knight, I'm responsible for the finances of the council. Patty and I have been parishioners at St. Joe's really for the entire 22 years we've been here. Our daughter Lizzie was an altar server for many years. The main reason why we moved, well, one of the reasons why we moved to Garden City, in addition to the excellent school district, is for the beauty of the village. Having gone to Villanova, I had friends that lived in town, and I'd go to visit them. And my parents were members of Garden City Country Club, Patty and I are house members now. But I remember going through the village and say, boy, this is a really beautiful town. I'd love to live here. And lo and behold, we were able to in 1998 when we moved here. Unfortunately, and particularly where we are, the beauty of the town has been destroyed by the third track construction. It started the end of 2018 when they pulled out all the trees and beautiful bushes that we had to look at down the end of our block, as well as a buffer against the noise of the trains. Now we look at the penitentiary wall that they put up, and as well as a number of plants. We got involved, myself and my neighbor Paul Rothenbiller, as well as my other neighbor Jim Kummel, really from the get-go. We went to meetings, we went to POA meetings, and trying to get information out of my trustee, or the two trustees that we had for the estates, was like pulling teeth. Particularly the one trustee, Trustee Dorney, who is on the third track committee. And we finally, Paul Rothenbill and I finally met with representatives of third track constructors, Travis Byrne and Leslie Meslick. You've probably seen them at the meetings. And they, of course, promised us that we were going to get landscaping definitely by the spring of 2020. So on a beautiful day in April, I'm sitting out. Of course, it was during the height of COVID and not working from home. And I was doing some paperwork outside, and all of a sudden these big trucks come down the street, these big tractor trailers. And they have these huge poles. What's going on? So I took a look, and they actually had quite a few of them coming down the block. They put up 3 or 4 poles as quickly as they can. So we, of course, contacted our third track representatives, Trustee Dorney and Macrinos. What's going on? As well as bringing it up at, well, the POA meetings at that point were resumed when they were in effect. It got very frustrating to attend meetings and talk to the trustees, and really no action was taken. They did send a letter in April asking that the LARR and MTA remove the poles because it was in violation of their agreement, and nothing happened. And they did nothing after that. So with the frustration that built up, the group Revamp, Resident Voters Against Monster Poles, was formed. I was a founding member, along with 5 or 6 other people, some that are on tonight. And we did we sent letters, we did everything we could. We had the town of Hempstead officials come out. We had a press conference, News 12, but no action by the board. In fact, they got resentful. So anyway, with the frustration going on, I heard from Don McLeod that he was putting together FabGC for a better Garden City. So let me go down and see what's going on. And I mean, I read about the casino and read about the firehouse, but then when you're actually down there and you hear people talking about it, and you realize their frustrations with the board and the inaction from the board and action when we didn't need it, I just started to get that much more involved. The platform FabGC has put together is just really what I liked. It encouraged citizens' involvement, which I don't really think this current board does. Encourages them to go to meetings, to serve on committees, which we certainly badly could have used for these various issues. Certainly the issue with the polls. I mean, from the get-go, they could have tried to put an injunction to stop them from putting them up. But now it's gone way out of hand. We have a train station that, you know, not to disparage Hicksville, but that's what it looks like. We're not that type of town. So once I heard that they were going to be, we were going to have referendums, if we're fortunate enough to be elected, whenever taxpayer money, big expenditures are being proposed, that was something I was very happy with. So I was honored when they asked me to run as trustee. And I feel I've got a lot to offer frankly, I feel our whole slate of trustees and our candidate for mayor have a lot to offer. So I'm looking forward to running, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Bruce. That was excellent. You too, Mary. Great presentations. John, can we get some questions from the audience?
Oh, should we tell? I don't think we've told people. I don't know if everyone was on last time, but in order to ask questions, we have two different routes you can
Right.
go. If you'd like John to read the question, you can just put it in the chat, the bottom of the screen, hit the chat box. The chat questions will go directly to John and he can read them. If you'd rather ask, go down to participants, click on that and just raise your hand. On the right, you see the spot where you raise your hand and you'll be unmuted so you can ask your question. So either way, whichever you're more comfortable with.
At least a couple of people figured it out while you all were
Okay.
talking.
Probably returners from last week.
Can you please address FABGC's position on the community agreement? Are you at all worried about disproportionate representation from the sections of the village by running outside the POAs? I guess, Mary?
I'll take that because I was part of working on an article about FABGC and the community agreement. It's something we've discussed with, as you can see from our platform, we've spent a lot of time discussing issues of the village government and coming up with what we think would be improvements. And the community agreement is not something that anyone in our group is looking to change. That's why we've put forth our candidates the way we have, with the mayor from the West, since it's traditionally the turn of the West to have the mayor. And we have the 4 different sections represented. I would encourage you, I won't bore you with to read the article that we put in the Garden City News. You can get it by just Googling FABGC and community agreement. And we go into the details, the history of the community agreement. We have a link to a great article by John Ellis Cordes back at the time of the, I guess it was 2016. He wrote a very interesting article on the history of the community agreement. And as we write in that article, it's really an ambition to have an equitable distribution of candidates and elected trustees from each of the 4 sections of the village. We agree with that, and that's why we're putting up the candidates representing all sections as well. The possibility of an unequal representation, I know, is something that has been raised, and that has to do with the way our elections are run. You don't vote per section. You'll vote for 4 trustees. And when it's uncontested, there's no question that there'll be equal representation of the 4 sections. Now that there is a contest, there is a possibility, and that's something no one, I think, wants. People tend to vote by slate. So we've discussed this, and it's unlikely statistically, because people do vote generally by slate, that you would have that issue. You'd have to have a lot of splitting of votes to run into a situation where you could potentially have one section with 2 trustees, elected, and another section with none. So we hope that that doesn't happen. We think it's highly unlikely. We don't think that possibility, which is highly unlikely, is a reason not to give residents a choice, especially in the climate we're in right now. We feel like it's the best thing for the village and for the community agreement to do what we're doing here. And we're hoping, I hope that everyone here votes for the 5 FABGC candidates.
Mary, did you mention, I may have, I just kind of adjusting my thing. The original community agreement says nothing about POAs.
Right, that's true. We went into that in the article. The community, right, the community agreement does not mention the POAs. It does not give indicate how the sections of town will come up with their candidates. It's really just saying, in the history of it, they were doing this so that the sections could get along. So the fact that we even have the FABGC which is a group of people from all the different sections, kind of shows that that separation of the sections that they worried about in drafting that isn't really something that's a concern any longer. But yeah, it doesn't mandate the community agreement. While the POAs use the term the community agreement party, the POAs are not mentioned in the community agreement.
And I certainly think there's been some frustration with the POAs. There's no doubt about that.
All right.
We have a lot of POA people in our group too, so
Yes,
no,
I
we won't
understand.
get into that right now.
I'm a POA member. So.
Yeah. Right, and then,
All right.
so I think that addressed, though, anything further on the community agreement from the group while we're on that topic?
We got popular in the last couple of minutes, so there's plenty of questions here.
Okay.
This one would have been for you, Mary, and then a very similar question for Bruce. What would you have done differently if given the chance with regards to the firehouse?
You want
Right,
to go,
so
Mary, or
That
I'll?
one was for Mary.
I'll start
but
because
then,
yeah. So as far as the firehouse, and one thing I want to make clear, like this is nothing to do with our volunteer fire department or, questioning expense. It's what's needed. The problem is the lack of any process and the lack of any transparency. And that is an issue as this group came together, and we came together kind of organically. These different issues were going on in the village, and we have done, we meet, a group of us meet for 2 hours every week. There's been a lot of discussion about the different issues, and the thread through all of the different issues we're having in the village right now is a lack of transparency and a lack of community engagement. So the issue that concerned me with the firehouse was the fact that I had a trustee who wouldn't answer such a simple question, and a question that we're really we deserve the answer to to that question. In addition, we had, I was watching a property owners committee present, and it was pretty clear that the trustees were not welcoming of their input. So I guess, how would I have handled it differently? I think the government has to follow the open meetings law. And I didn't know much about the open meetings law before I got involved in FABGC. And that's another article we wrote. But deliberations are required to be done in public with few exceptions. So the deliberation where the Board of Trustees was deciding to hire a contractor to, a design company to draw up these plans, that should have been in public. It's required to be in public, and it wasn't. So I guess number one, deliberate in public, let the public know what's going on. Were there other bids? There's no evidence that there were other bids. And I do know that the Board of Trustees will use an exception to the requirement for bids for a service contract, but I don't think there's anyone here who would do a $10,000 project without getting other bids. So that step in the process, that's troubling too, that perhaps there were no other bids for a project of that size. And the decision to demolish the oldest building in the western section, as far as I know, I cannot think of an older building in the western section. And it's really a focal point of the western section. For that decision also to have been made without any public deliberations.
Mary, let me interject for a moment.
Yeah, I guess what I would do is I would have done all of that in the open, including getting bids and hearing community input.
Mary, let me interject for a moment, because I'm a member of that committee in the western section, and our committee was formed in 2019, the fall of 2019, and to this day, we still don't have an answer. So again, it's not only about the process of getting an RFP for this particular firehouse, it's doing an analysis village-wide to see what is needed in terms of fire protection. So there's a lack of a master plan, a lack of really understanding from a global point of view what is necessary to protect our residents.
Right,
It's
that's,
just-
I guess,
Sorry you brought the subject up, but
Yeah,
that's
no,
true.
it's-
Cosmo
it's-
has more information really on all the firehouse, but right, that is something we've discussed as well as far as the needs assessment and where that is. And I think that's something the fire department would want to, and I guess, yeah, the committee, I don't think even had a chance to meet with the volunteer firefighters to find out what their.
no, we have not.
Yeah,
No,
so-
nothing like that has happened, unfortunately.
I guess I gave kind of a long-winded answer. It's probably more than you were looking for, but it's not a quick response because I don't know what the needs assessment would be. I don't know what other bids may have come in, and I don't know what the whole community would have said if there had been a deliberation on demolishing the firehouse.
pretty much summed it up, Mary. But the problem with this board has been that they don't put things out for bid. And any business knows to do that or would want to do that in the interest of their constituents, the residents of the village. And they certainly didn't do that here with the study that they did to come up with a $10 million firehouse. I went past it tonight and I'm looking at the building, and why in God's name would they want to do that? It's a beautiful firehouse. And most people in other communities can see that.
So Bruce, you actually had a very similar question asked while you were speaking. What would you have done different if given the chance on the issue?
Well, it
of
would have
polls?
been very similar to what Mary, I mean, you would have had an open discussion about it. And of course, you would have heard from a million, bunch of residents saying that, what are you talking about? Why would you do this? And certainly put out for bid the study that you're doing and get citizens involvement in this thing before you go ahead and do it.
John, was the question on the polls for Bruce or the firehouse?
Sorry, that was confusing the way that I asked.
All
So
right.
you were each asked very similar questions. Mary, you were asked about the firehouse. At least I think it was while you were talking. And the same question was asked of Bruce about the polls. My apologies for the confusing way that I combined
I'm
them.
sorry. What would I have done differently in the polls, or well, first of all, you would get clear that the polls are not going to be on the south side of the tracks, and make that very clear. Once they started doing that, and the contractor knew what they were doing, third track construction, let's get as many polls as we can in before people start to notice or before they can do anything in the height of the pandemic. So I would have attempted to have some kind of injunction to get them to stop from doing it. And unfortunately, that was never done. And it's just gotten worse. The polls have gone up. The station is just a monstrosity, in my opinion. It's just changed everything dramatically for the residents in the northern estates. So, and I would have questioned thoroughly as to why you can't bury the poles. And the answer is very simple. They didn't want to bury the poles because of the expense, maybe, and the time perhaps. And third track constructions gets a bonus the quicker they do this. And that's all they were concerned about. There was no concern with the residents at all. Absolutely not. And as a matter of fact, because they were in violation of the agreement, the New York State law, SECRA, any changes, there was an environmental impact statement that was made based on the poles being on the north, not being on the south. And they were supposed to have hearings. That was never done. Never done to discuss the fact that we're going to put poles on the south of the tracks. There's a woman who lives a couple of blocks away, 5 children. She's got a pole almost on top of her house. So I would have had a lot more action than these trustees did on this issue. I can assure you of that. John, can't hear you.
Couple of points to clarify for the sake of accuracy. There's been no decision to tear down the firehouse. I'm not sure if you mentioned tearing it down or not, Mary. And then a follow-up to that question that I think you answered, Bruce, but what are the alternatives to putting the poles where they are while still ensuring service for Long Island Railroad commuters.
Just back on the polls, who was the comment that there's been no decision, or was that a question?
It was just a comment
Who was that from?
from Judy Courtney.
Oh, hi, Judy. So
Is that on the firehouse? There's no
Yeah.
decision?
Firehouse, I believe there is. I believe they did make a decision because they had to opt for different plans from PCAD, and they opted for the demolition new construction plans, which we're told are being drawn up now. And I think it was just delayed the presentation because of COVID. Unless there's been a meeting that we don't know about,
Yeah, there's been no
and
meeting.
change of
Mary.
plans.
Otherwise, I assume that $342,000 we spent for PCAD in a no bid contract would be entirely wasted. Is that correct, Cosmo?
Absolutely.
Well, it might be, but I don't think they should build a $10 million firehouse because of that.
Well, I understand, but it kind of implies they've already made a decision to spend that kind of money.
They did, though. I think that is, I think that has been established.
Yeah.
They had to make a choice to decide what plans they were getting, and they opted for the demolition new construction plans.
No, that statement's incorrect. Yeah, okay.
All right.
Regarding the polls, John, you said yes, I think I did answer it. I mean, I think we'd like to have had them buried. And I think third, as I said, third track constructors was more concerned about getting more money, getting a bonus for getting the project done quickly. We're not concerned about the residents. Certainly having them on the north wouldn't have been great, but now they seem to have them on both. They have some on the north, they have a lot on the south, and they keep coming up and coming up.
All right. Thoughts on opening schools up full-time for in-person learning?
You know what?
Both
We're
of
getting a
your-
lot of these questions, but it's not our in our jurisdiction, so we don't have any. The Board of Trustees, I don't believe, has any say. That would be the Board of Ed. So I am
Yes, go to the board of ed meetings.
feeling
Go to
for
the
all
Board
of the
Ed meetings.
parents now in these difficult times, but that wouldn't be something, we can't take a position. It would be silly for us to give a position on that since we wouldn't be able to vote on it.
That's true.
So
Are there environmental concerns related to the monster poles?
Oh, God,
Bruce?
yeah. Yes, there absolutely is. As Jim Cumble, who's part of Revamp, wrote a great article, The MTA's Electromagnetic Paradise, and what they can give off. I would suggest it was in the Garden City News, I think just this past Friday's Garden City News, that people read it. I think one of the other issues we got to worry about is the 5G mini tower attachments. Now, they've been thumbing their nose, or as some people said, giving us the middle finger ever since this project has started. And I think that's another issue that you'd have to be worried about, the 5G mini tower attachments, which would make it worse, you know, as far as I'm concerned, environmentally.
All right. What is the current status of the casino? My understanding is that they have issued another one-year lease, but have essentially reneged on a multi-year deal. Any update? I don't know if any, do you, Mary?
I don't
have-
think there is any update that's been given. Does anyone have other information? So they're now in a position where, right, they don't have a lease for upcoming tennis seasons.
We certainly, I think, Mary, we're going to review that if we get to the point of trustees and try to accommodate them with an extended lease, but we'd have to sit down with them and talk about it.
Anyone on from the casino who has any further information on that?
Oh,
Raise your hand or ask.
yeah, Savan asked, raise her hand. I don't know if it's to ask a question or
Clearly,
to
I
speak
say a
about
lot.
this, but
No, I wanted to correct it. We do have we do have the opportunity to play this upcoming season. They extended it until January 2022 from its two previous extensions, which the last one ended January 1st, 2021. But currently, to our knowledge, there isn't anything that had happened. The last time I know, my husband, as well as two others, one of them being a casino board member, went to the central POA. They had spoken. They were told that something would happen, but we have yet to see it. I mean, I'm not a board member, but from all of my knowledge, nothing has happened yet. But the main thing I think is that no reason is given. We'll put it like that. The transparency, and we flat out came to POA meetings, we asked, and we received no answers.
Interestingly, I was listening to the Western property owners, and some people may have been there, but it sounded like Trustee Bolbrook was saying that there's a new trustee who's going to be added on to the discussions. And someone in the audience asked, well, when did that happen? And he said, well, it happened right after the meeting. So, I mean, the transparency, the casino is a glaring issue with transparency, because we now have, I believe the mayor said they've been talking about it for 5 years. Trustee Donnie's now, said that they've had some discussions with the hotel, maybe preliminary, about renting the space. There have been deliberations going on with this board for years, and the open meetings law that I mentioned, they have to be done in public. And I don't know if someone wants to enlighten me about some minutes from a meeting. I don't believe there have been any about the casino. So it's all been secret.
This whole thing with the casino is just outrageous. My wife and I are not members, but we've been there numerous times because we have friends that are members. I mean, it's been something that's been in Garden City for 125 years. And you're going to think about selling it off? I mean, that's asinine. And yet, that's what this board was considering doing. I don't understand it, but again, that's one of the reasons why I guess we're all running.
Yeah, I don't think anyone understood. I haven't heard of any explanation really as to, just, guesses as to what they may be thinking. So, any other questions, John?
Lots. And just to kind of reiterate something that I say every time, you don't have to send them through me. You are welcome to send them through me. But if you'd like to speak, use the raise hand option, or simply message me that you want me to unmute you. Any of those are fine. Question, what are your thoughts on non-Garden City residents using Garden City parks and the pool? It was a huge problem during COVID.
Actually, the tennis courts I noticed at the park, because we were some of the few tennis courts that were open, and tennis was a good COVID activity. So I did notice in all my years in Garden City, I've never seen the crowds at our park tennis courts, or the waits. So, I went and waited, it was the normal thing. So I think there were some unusual times though during COVID. And I don't know if it's not typical that the tennis courts, people are coming to use our tennis courts. Parks, I guess the same issue. So I don't know that how big of an issue it is outside of the pandemic. I know there have been a lot of discussions, and I think the rec commission has actually come up with a plan to make it, you need a pass to get into the park. And I've heard both sides of that, and I see both sides of it.
Yeah, I think
Park does it. Not many people do it, but
I think there has to be some control of it. And yes, COVID definitely increased the out-of-town participation in the tennis courts, and particularly at the high school. I like to walk on the track at the high school, and one of the few things you could do during COVID was that. And I would see numerous kids that I knew were not from Garden City. They were very good soccer players. And they were on the field, and I'm saying, oh, these guys were on our team. But anyway, so it was clearly there. And taking my granddaughter to the park, I noticed a definite increase. As far as the pool, I mean, I would think you'd have to have guest passes to get in there. I mean, that was a normal situation when we were members for quite a few years. And you would have to have a guest pass to get someone in. So I don't exactly understand what happened there, unless I guess they had 1 million guest passes that they were giving out. But yeah, it's a beautiful pool, and maybe that's the reason. But we definitely have to get some control on that.
Yeah, I have to say on the parks thing and the fields, my kids will go to carry. You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm not big on closing stuff off because we use other parks too. I know a lot of Garden City people go to that Mineola Park that has a volleyball court and a wall. So I think it's something it's being worked on now, and I haven't. I don't have the. It sounds like there's a direction already being taken, and I'd listen to input on it, but.
I would too, but I
I
think
wouldn't say I'm
we,
a
we
big
do
on
have
closing
we do
things.
have to get some control on it. That's what I think.
Why didn't any of you run through the POA process? Although the community agreement didn't specifically mention the POA process, they are linked.
So I can feel this one if you want, because
I'm going to feel it too, Mary, but you go first.
it's something that it came up in a lot of our meetings, and there was a thought, well, why don't we just do it that way? But there are kind of, different reasons that what we're doing, we decided to do with the 5 candidates, I think is the best course. One being with the transparency issues that we're touching on. Our platform is really for, a changing culture at the Board of Trustees. And that's something that would be difficult to do if you were 1 or 2 new members on the Board of Trustees. And one thing that's, actually, we've got a great article coming this week in the Garden City News that everyone should read. And it's one of the many 8-0 votes by the Board of Trustees. And it's going to be difficult that though all those 8-0 votes, that one was, to silence the Garden City News, our local newspaper, to go into that culture of an 8-0 vote all the time as 1 or 2 people who want transparency would be very difficult to effectuate change. So that is a primary reason. I think there are also practical reasons that it's not really, the POA system is not set up to encourage challenges. It's got a very, short window in which you are able to, announce and then campaign. So
They have a very short window and it's very limited. And having gotten involved in the POA, and I don't want to knock people that volunteer. I mean, you have to say a lot for that they volunteer in the POA, they volunteer to serve on the Board of Trustees. But my immediate POA, and I know this is with some of the other ones, but the state POA, was absolutely no assistance whatsoever with our issue with the polls. None. And we had been going to meetings, myself and my neighbors, since 2018. Once the third track was going through and that was it. I mean, other mayors in the past kind of fought it, but that changed because the railroad offered all the different towns, different incentives to allow it to go through. But in fact, our POA, when we were trying to get some litigation and we were trying to get them to get involved along with the third track trustees, Macrinos and Dorney, our trustees, Dorney and Colleen Foley, did absolutely nothing. And the POA, the estate's POA, actually posted talking points from Jano Lieber from the railroad. So I just didn't see them going in the direction that we had revamped wanted, and frankly, in the best interest of the overall village. So I had no issue with us going outside of the POAs. And the community agreement pretty much clearly said that that was not a criteria.
Okay, I might be going out of order just a little bit, but TJ Michon has a live question and that gets me off the hook for a second. So I'm gonna ask TJ to ask his question.
Good evening, everybody, and just want to thank you for stepping up, volunteering your time to help. So the bidding process and the RFP came up on purchases, but what's also been practice of the board for the past 10 years or so is to consistently hire consultants for issues without RFPs. The other point of an RFP, one is to get the best candidate at the cheapest price, but it also is a bit of transparency because you're putting together a request of what you're looking for. And then the village residents know, why are we hiring this consultant? You know, what is the consultant supposed to be analyzed, and so on and so forth. I guess my question is, like, with the RFP process, do you agree that that's the best way to go forward with consultants or any professional services as well as village projects?
I mean, Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I don't know if there'd be like the service issue. I don't know if we'd always need, I think certainly need transparency. You need to get bids. I'd have to look at, would have to discuss, I think, what the RFP, I don't see a drawback to it, having an RFP. So why not? But I have not, I don't know if there may be situations where you'd not have an RFP. Don, I think you've looked into this more.
There might theoretically be one or two very technical areas where only one company has a particular expertise, and you'd want to go with that company. I think, and I understand that it's not absolutely required by village law. That does not mean it's good business practice. That does not mean it's good policy. And I think TJ would know, or even Cosmo, one of the reasons you do an RFP and get multiple bids is if you sit in front of 3 or 4 contractors, and Cosmo, correct me if I'm wrong, you learn from them and you look at each of the 4 proposals, and then you can go back and cut and slice and make them bid around each other. And the 4th proposal might bring something into light that the first 3 people haven't mentioned and you haven't seen before. I know this because the company I work for, we buy construction companies. So it's a very, 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 very standard process. I have never in my entire career seen a $342,000 contract that has no RFP and has no bids. It is almost unheard of in anything I have ever seen in all the years I've been doing this. Cosmo would know better than me if I could.
Well, let me explain. In architecture and construction and engineering, when someone seeks engineering services or architectural services, an RFP is put out to various firms that are pre-qualified. For example, if they have a certain expertise in a certain facet of design or engineering. So you would send out 5 requests for proposals. The reason why we do 5, and that's sort of the magic number, is because somebody's going to bid high, somebody's going to bid low, and you work with the 3 bidders in the middle, and then you negotiate a contract. But what you're doing is not only seeing the pricing and seeing the scope of services, but you're seeing the quality of the people you're going to be entering into a contract with, which is very, very important. Just going out to, let's say, the firehouse, what they've done here, going out to one firm doesn't make any sense to me. We had no idea that there was no RFP really. And even though the village has a procurement law for professional services that does not require multiple proposals, that doesn't mean that's what you do, right? My position has always been, I don't care if you're buying garbage cans or you're buying legal services. You want to know who's out there and get the best possible cost for the residents. We do this in our business all the time. We do this for all our clients. I don't know any other way of doing it. I mean, I've never been involved in a negotiated contract where they just said, Cosmo, it's your job. I've never seen that before.
Shouldn't there be the terminology lowest responsible bidder in there somewhere?
Yes, that is the typical language. But again, you're getting the lowest responsible bidding in an RFP process, right? You're going out to multiple bids. It's not just getting one bid saying that's the lowest responsible bid. You have to analyze a group of bids to determine what is the lowest responsible bid.
Well,
That answer it, TJ?
Well, yeah, just one of the major concerns was, if we go back to the handicap parking issue, that request was made by a resident. He brought it to the commission. And then out of nowhere, we were just told that, oh, the village hired a consultant. And then the consultant came back with some astronomical figures of what it would cost to put handicap parking. But if we had an RFP of what they were requesting from the consultant and knew that you had multiple consultants bidding on that, and we don't even know if the consultant they hired was a responsible consultant. Was the consultant hired just to tell them what they wanted to hear to avoid handicap parking? So at least RFP would have, made it transparent to the residents of why they were hiring the consultant, what they were asking the consultant to analyze, and make it more of a clear and transparent process.
You said the
I think we've
magic
all-
word, what they wanted to hear, TJ. That seems to be what this board did quite frequently.
All right, so I think we're all on the same page here as the RFPs are good business.
Yep, thank you.
All right, John, do we have another question?
Okay.
Will the village address how to get the voting availability out to those who cannot come out to vote? Will they be able to file ballots in another way?
I just actually spoke with Karen Altman today, who thinks there's no problem if people are uncomfortable because of COVID. She assured me they can just apply for an absentee ballot and put temporary illness. I was a little concerned because I looked at the absentee ballot for my son and it doesn't have the COVID language that we saw on the presidential ballots. So we're following up on that. The word from Karen Altman as of today is that that ballot's okay. You can put in temporary illness. I would write down COVID just so you're being totally upfront on the ballot. And it seems that won't be any problem with letting that be a reason. We're going to be, doing some confirmation on that, but you may want to call her and confirm it yourself with her as well. But that's what she told me today. And I can't imagine that the village would not allow people to vote by absentee ballot during a pandemic.
Hopefully she will, because is there any limitations, did she mention, Mary, about absentee ballots?
Well,
we
what do you
could
mean?
have quite a bit of them.
Yeah, no, she assured me today that COVID is okay, like it was in the national election. I don't think technically the executive order is still in effect. It may be reinstated, but according to Karen Altman, we're good on absentee ballots.
I think we need to also address that how many machines they have on the day of the election, because there certainly is going to be more than a couple of hundred people voting this time. And I wonder what accommodations they're going to make to that. I think we have to find that out from them.
Right.
Carrie, did you have a live question?
Yeah, Mary, that was actually my question, because as I have been going around with the petitions, I want all the people here who are, giving their time to the village and hopefully going to be our new board of trustees. The feedback from a lot of people is it's about time. We need new people. We need people who stand for this village. But it's also a lot of elderly people that are afraid to go out and vote. So I think we have to kind of look into this pretty quickly and make it known through the paper and everywhere else that an absentee ballot will be available to them, and how are we going to go about getting it to people, because many people I know in the western section don't want to go out and about because of COVID, but they want this change. They want you guys. So we've got to figure that one out as soon as we can. I mean, the election isn't that far off.
Yes, thank you, Carrie, and thanks for what you've been doing. And I think we will, we're going to make sure that we are, as helpful as we can be with getting all that information out. I think they can also be, they can be dropped off and or delivered, hand delivered, the mailing, if the mailing is short too, we should be able to have, Fab GC people with helping people if they're unable to get it in on time.
Mary, I think as soon as we clear this up this week, we'll put it all right on the website.
Yes. Oh, that's actually news we didn't share yet. Very exciting. We have a wonderful website. Thank you. John and Mickey did a great job. And it's going to make it a lot easier for everyone to get our information. And that will be something you'll be able to find on our website. So unlike the last time, all it is fabgc.org. You can see our platform. You can read up more on our candidates. There'll be more information coming, and you can contact us through the website. The link for our meetings even now will be like today. If you went onto the website, you could just go to events and our Zoom would have come up, and the link's right there. So up and running with the website. And we will definitely get all that on the absentee ballot information on there. Thank you, Carrie.
Great news.
What is your position on St. Paul's? There's an easy one.
Right on our platform. So the community decides. I don't think you'll get a room of people together to agree on St. Paul's. So I think the idea that any candidate would run with a solution to St. Paul's or a decision on St. Paul's isn't feasible. But I think we have discussed this issue a lot, and our candidates are all in agreement that unlike the present board, the decision on St. Paul's is for the village to make, and it'll be by referendum.
We'll try to come up with a plan at some point and give the village two options.
All right, I've got just a couple more. Hopefully people can stay with us just a little past 9. With regards to the firehouse, there were additions in their plans for unnecessary items. Example, a gym, a party room. There are things at the main house for no reason for it to be in working only houses. Equipment is not getting larger but smaller and just as efficient. Why do they feel it needs to be rebuilt rather than just brought up to code? How can we stop the demolition of the firehouse? Or how can you stop? I guess
I'd vote for FabGC to stop the demolition of the firehouse would be the answer to that. 5 FabGC candidates. As far as, and actually one thing that, I got a question on was Cosmo did plans for the firehouse, volunteered his services to put together plans to show that the same specifications, everything, the needs could be met without demolition and for a lower price tag. But one thing is, that we want to be clear on is all of those specifications, there needs to be a reset button on the firehouse, and we need to find out first what the needs are. And that goes right to that question. And we don't know because we haven't gotten any information from the Board of Trustees about the process. We haven't had a chance to communicate with the volunteer firefighters. So that, I think, would be a first step. I think a reset is needed on the project and start with what we need, finding out what we need.
That certainly would be a good idea. I mean, Cosmo did such an excellent job in drawing up plans to keep the firehouse and just make the renovations to it, which is what should be done. And of course, there's some question is about the ladder truck and the need for a ladder truck in the western part of the village, where they don't have the size buildings that the central part of the village and where the main firehouse is, as well as the eastern firehouse, have to deal with. So again, as Mary said,
I want to make something clear so everybody understands what really happened here. When I joined this committee in 2019, and they were discussing the potential demolition of this firehouse, I said, well, why? Why would you do that without doing an analysis of the existing facility? People saying it's falling down, it's in total disrepair. Yes, it's lacked maintenance for 20 years because the village hasn't really maintained it for 20 years. However, it's not falling down. If it was falling down, it'd be a pile of rubble by now. So what I did was, as any architect would do, they would test it. And by testing, it means you look at the drawings, you look at the existing conditions, you look at a potential program, and you apply it to that particular structure. And so when I did that, I said, I'm going to do this for my committee pro bono, because otherwise they would not have a chance of having a discussion. Just imagine, the village has hired a firm, right, paying them $342,000 to come up with drawings, and my committee has no budget. So I said, I'm going to do this pro bono, and if it works, then we're going to go forward. But I also told them that if it wasn't feasible, then I would recommend demolition if it wasn't feasible. So again, I'm not, I'm not so gung ho on just saving a structure or tearing one down. We go through a process of analysis. We understand the code, we understand how the building is built, we do archival research, and then you come up with a plan. That's how a project is put together logically. So again, that applies for the firehouse, it applies for St. Paul's, applies for any structure that you're looking at in the village, right? So you do the analysis and then you come up with a conclusion, but you just don't say arbitrarily, I'm just going to tear it down because it's 90 years old. That's not an answer. And that's what appalled my committee members. So I said to them, the only way we can discuss this logically and intelligently is I have to come up with some sort of concept drawing for the firehouse, incorporating some of the elements, as you said, a gym, a bar, things of that nature that the firemen wanted in their program or wish list. Sometimes we call it a wish list, right? So we applied it and it seemed like we can accommodate those program items in conjunction with restoring the firehouse and saving the building. And that's what I want to make clear, that if we couldn't do that, we would recommend demolition and build a brand new firehouse, but not to tear it down and spend $10 million to make it look like what it was originally. That makes no sense.
All right, do we have more? I actually have a question that was emailed to me by Bob Wolf, who can't make it tonight, but I'll field the questions first of people who are here. Do we have any more, John?
Yes, a couple actually. Why is it important to elect the entire FABGC slate rather than an individual candidate?
Okay, at that, just to rehash a bit, that was the issue with the slate is to have a cultural change and bring transparency. Transparency is what we've found to be the largest issues underlying all these different things that are going on right now with the present board. And that requires following the open meetings law, and you need a majority to do it. And if we've got all 8-0 votes right now and not having open discussions, it's going to be difficult to open things up and become transparent if we only have 2 people committed to that. Is that clear? Is that answering the question? Who's asking? I want to make sure they're.
I think it is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, basically, you've had the 8-0 votes, numerous ones, including getting rid of the Garden City News and then having Garden City Life and then bringing Garden City News back because they realized more people read that than Garden City Life, and where they were paying $8,000 to the Garden City News, they paid $12 to Garden City Life. Garden City News came back, they wanted $12, so now they're paying $24,000 instead of $8,000. But there's been a number of 8-0 votes, and I think you would really need a full slate from FABGC to really change the culture of the village. I don't see that happening if just a couple of us happen to win. I think it's going to be more battles, and we've got to change the culture.
Next question, John.
How will you address residents who don't feel their concerns are being taken seriously?
Well, we're going to take everyone's concerns seriously, so we wouldn't have to hopefully have that question. I mean, like just having, I think every question should be taken seriously and answered by the Board of Trustees. They're public servants. So
I agree.
That's something I think everyone, all 5 candidates are in agreement on. And
Mary, I'd like to add that some questions require more than 4 minutes. The answers to those questions require more than 4 minutes.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. I don't know if this is from the same person who asked about St. Paul's or a different person, but I'd really like to hear the candidates' thoughts as to what they suggest we do with St. Paul's, not just leave it to a referendum. Doesn't really tell us what your suggestions are.
Well, I think that's something we have to review. I mean, we're not going to just arbitrarily come out with, hey, this is what we want to do right now. We've got to look at different plans and different things and come up with what we think would be the best option for the village. And then again, offer a referendum.
Yeah, I mean, I think another thing that we've talked about is something that was, part of Garden City government in the past and hasn't been in the last 10 years really, or certainly 5 years, about committees and getting residents more involved. St. Paul's is a huge issue. And it's going to take a lot of deliberation and thought to come up with a plan on what to do. There are a lot of people I know in town who don't want any more time or money spent on St. Paul's and want to demolish St. Paul's. I think if, the idea of having people come together who want to preserve St. Paul's, and there are a lot of smart, talented people in Garden City, let them come together and develop the best plan they can, perhaps over a course of 12 months. What is the best thing that we could do, considering the building, the condition of the building, and restrictions, and what could we sell to the village? I think that's what it's going to come down to.
I think mentioning committees is the key word. Yes, we definitely should have a committee. And one thing this board didn't do was they didn't have too many committees. The third track committee, just to use that as an example, why are 2 trustees on it? Maybe 1 trustee, and then gets some residents on it with backgrounds, lawyers, whatever, to look into it. And that's something I think we've all agreed that we're going to look to have committees on the various issues that we have to deal with.
Yeah. I think if there was an easy answer, I don't think anyone here, if there was an easy answer on a plan for St. Paul's, we wouldn't be here this many years later. So I think.
Could I add one thing?
Sure.
I think one of the problems that makes it so difficult is the board hasn't released any plans about either, one, the physical upkeep of the building. So I've received 4 or 5 literally beautiful full page plans for what to be done. I'm not sure physically some of these things can be done. One plan calls for a STEM school with an underground pool and sliding roofs. I'm not sure a building like that can handle it anymore. So I think the first thing is to actually see the physical shape. And the board has released nothing, Cosmo, to the best of my knowledge, for years and years and years. The other thing that, and I think this might go to some of the people that want to tear it down tomorrow, and I go back and forth myself, but the board has refused to release the numbers of what we have spent the last 29 years maintaining that building in this state. Are we spending $100,000 a year or $1 million? Nobody seems to know. So I think those are, standard pieces of information that anybody looking at this would want to know. Frankly, I don't know why the town doesn't know, just from a disclosure point of view, what we spent in the last 29 years. But it's hard for this group of, 70, 80 to really have an intelligent opinion, because we do not have any of the information, in my opinion, necessary to even start narrowing down the uses of that building. If there are any uses that are possible after this period. I don't know, Cosmo, you're a better architect than I've ever met, but.
No, but Don, it is a very complicated issue. And like Bruce was saying, you have to form a committee of residents who really understand the subject matter, be it legal, be it engineering, construction, design, historical. This is a very, very significant building for Garden City. And what I recommend is an assessment be done of the condition, a really thorough assessment, and then come up with a plan of what can be done, what uses can be applied to the building. We're restricted right now. It's a parkland designation. It has to be for community use. So what community uses can go into this building and give it a new life, essentially what we call adaptive reuse. But it requires a lot of analysis. I go into a project like this, I have no preconceived notions. I mean, you may come up with the analysis that you have to tear it down, that there's no use that you can use for St. Paul's, right? But again, you have to do the analysis first and then come up with a plan where you have citizens involved in the process, and then go to a vote, right? And have the residents vote on the issues.
All right. Any other questions, John?
Yeah, a bit of a rebuttal to that last point. And I think this came in while you were talking about referendum, Mary. The current deputy mayor says the same thing as you. So how are you different?
All right. Is that
He's been there
Is
10
that-
years.
In regards to
He
a
Is
hasn't
that
done it.
referendum.
reference to, who's the question? And is it reference, are they asking about,
It's in reference to the referendum, I believe.
to the fact that, yes, Deputy Mayor Bollebrook has said the same thing. But as to the question of how we're different, I think you can look to our platform and see what we're committed to as far as transparency, and read what we've been submitting to the Garden City News, and the differences will be evident.
And the deputy mayor
And
has
if I
access to
could
a
just
lot
chirp
more
in.
information than we have right now. Go ahead, I'm sorry, Don.
And I guess I would just argue he's been there 8 years. If he was so far behind it, he would have put the motion forward at least one time in 8 years. It's very easy to say, oh, this is what I want. If you really believe it, put the motion forward and have everybody vote on it. Don't just say it after a meeting.
That's true. I don't believe there's been a statement at a Board of Trustees meeting
Nope,
But-
there is not.
to that effect.
All
And
right.
I think the board as a whole has been asked numerous times to commit to a referendum and has not done that.
So I'm going to combine several questions into one just a little bit because they're all in the same vein. And just want to remind everybody that we record these and post them on Facebook if you can't stick around. When are the elections? How many votes do we need? When can we, or sorry, what can we do to get the word out? And how many votes do we all, those on tonight's call, need to round up?
Round up as many votes as you can get. We don't know until we know how many people go. We need one more than the other side, and we don't know what the turnout will be. This hasn't really happened before in our village. So I don't think anyone can tell you how many people are going to be out voting. So try to get everyone, talk it up, share, join, visit our website and share information, and, reach out to us with any questions.
There's going to have to be a lot of legwork. The POAs are organized. They have their little nominating committees, so it's going to be a tough goal, but we'll need a lot of volunteers to get out there and spread the word.
Right. Actually, send an email, right now, those who are interested in helping out with, specific campaigning, let us know so we can, get everybody organized. And that brings me, actually, can I just quickly, because Bob Wolf did have a question. He wanted to know who the officers were, whether we had minutes to our meetings. He had questions about the organization.
Really?
And as to that, as Bruce was just pointing out, we don't have that structure. We are a new grassroots organization, and we do not have officers, nor do we have a secretary to take minutes, although we have been, spending a lot of time researching, writing, and discussing these village issues to try to restore transparency and community engagement for the village. Okay, John, do we have another? I think that answers.
One thing that was part of that last question, and actually probably just good hygiene for us, is to mention when the election is.
Oh, March
It's March 16th.
March
So we
16th.
should probably just start saying that
March
as often as
16th,
we can, because that will be the big thing.
Yes,
the day before St. Patrick's Day.
just remember that day, right? Just before St. Patty's Day.
Okay. McLeod will.
And you can, as far as the absentee ballots on timing stuff, you can go ahead and put your request in for that now. And we may maybe we'll try and get that form on our website. I think it's on the village. Can you get it, Don? Do you know?
If you email us at the FAB website, I will send you the electronic form. I believe because we have a high tech team, we can probably get it on the website in the next 24 hours. So if you just click it, that will save you. That will be the application for them to send you the absentee ballot. Or you can just go to 351 Stewart Avenue and pick it up.
Actually, they don't have the ballots prepared yet. You can get the application there.
With the application, right?
Yes, the application.
Any other questions, John?
Yeah, that spawned a couple more about voting procedures and things like that. Is there going to be 2 candidates for each area of the village, and can a resident vote for 4 trustees?
Yes,
Yes, yeah,
and yes.
yes, they can.
Well,
And there is, I think, 2 candidates for each area. So the POAs have one and we have the other. And,
plus mayor.
and mayor, absolutely. Let's not forget mayor.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So there is 2 candidates for each area of the town, all 4 areas, and 2 candidates for mayor.
Are we allowed to have lawn signs? So there's some name recognition for FabGC.
I always thought that was against the rules, but I hear that now it's considered free speech and it's okay. I don't know.
Yeah, I had heard that too. And, you know, you seem like you get annoyed when you see some of the political signs that are out. It's one thing about our town that's been great is the fact that we don't have political signs. I mean, I wouldn't mind having them, but, you know, Mickey was putting them together, but, you know, it's something to think about.
We'll look
Yeah.
into that.
Yeah, we have to.
It also
because-
requires a picture.
well, we have pictures, you know.
I know.
I have mine with my tux.
Sure.
So I have it all over the town. But I don't know. It's you know, I've heard different views from different people.
If anybody wakes up with a Fab lawn sign on their lawn, the answer is yes.
Now, did we have a question from Daniel McElroy?
Oh,
I
Yes,
think, and actually the park issue, that was going through my mind too, and the park pass, although I think that's underway. But we had a question from the anti-racism group in Garden City.
yes, and then that's it. Unless I've missed someone, I did not mean to. So if I did, please chat again or raise your hand. Or if you'd like to ask the question in a slightly different way than perhaps I did, feel free. But so the question that came in from that group, how do you feel about Garden City leaving the Nassau County Urban Consortium, and do you support re-entering the consortium?
All right, so that is the village. I think everyone was surprised to hear we left the minute we were able to, and no explanation was given for that. So we don't know why it was that we left the consortium, whether it was a cost factor or some, I don't know. And I don't think the anti-racism group knows either. So I think there should be some explanation, because it's certainly not good optics for Garden City to be leaving that group as soon as we're able to.
I think we have to review it, Mary, if we do get the opportunity.
Right. As far as rejoining, I don't know the
Yeah.
details or what their rationale was. If there was some good reason that we were leaving it, we don't know what it is. So we'll look into that.
And this one, can the village wait to approve any plan put forward by the Garden City Police Department pursuant to New York Executive Order 203 until after Long Island United to Transform Policing and Community Safety has a chance to release our People's Plan and consider our research in developing and altering strategies and procedures? Feels a little early for y'all to answer for the village, but
Right.
perhaps just your position on getting People's Plan.
I think that's something we'd need to hear details on as well, like the other issue. And
Absolutely. Yeah, we'd have to see it and hear and talk about it.
with the transparency, though, I think that we would welcome input from residents, and we would thoughtfully consider all of those, the input, and we will explain transparently our rationale for making decisions on issues like that one.
Okay, one statement, and then another question. With all the signs thanking frontline workers and congratulating Garden City graduates and such, it would be very difficult for the village to ban political signs.
True. And
And
I've done a
then-
lot of those sports signs. At least, I remember getting for the nursery school, it was like you had to get a permit to have a sign up, but that seems to have fallen by the wayside and we're all signing away.
And then does the architectural committee report to the trustees? Does FabGC have an opinion about the current state of new developments and tear downs being approved?
You know, we talked about that a bit at the last meeting, and Cosmo is a great resource on that issue, having served on the board for so long. I'd ask Cosmo, what is the relationship between the Board of Trustees and the Architectural Review Board?
Well, the BOT really, they appoint members to the board. They don't really get involved with those issues. The ADRB and the zoning board and the planning board, I think they should work more together, especially when zoning is involved of a particular property. Let's take, for example, Tannis Pond Road, right? A large plot of land that's divided up to accommodate two houses that almost look like they're squashed together. That was approved as of right by the zoning board. So when the Architectural Design Review Board gets that application, it's already been approved in terms of zoning. And all we can do is review, the details of the house and, for example, the finishes, the color, and how it relates to the other properties. So my recommendation is to really, when the zoning board gets an application like that, not to approve it initially, and have a discussion with the ADRB to see how we can make it better, how we can maybe modify the zoning a bit and allow them to modify the house so it doesn't really become out of context with the rest of the homes in the area. These kinds of developments, even though they are legal based on the current zoning law, they do cause a higher density in these parts of our village. So my recommendation would be to look at that zoning law and see what we can modify. So if, let's say, there is what we call a subdivision of a particular lot, then that can come up at the zoning board and they can say, okay, we have a special condition here. Let's discuss it with the ADRB and maybe we can change the zoning law to make it more palatable for the residents. Right now, I think it's, unfortunately, that project, as I said, was as of right. And it does cause what we call a negative effect to the community in terms of density.
Yeah, I thought that was, I would agree with Cosmo that that's something we should be looking at, addressing those zoning, because it's not good for the community.
No.
It's a complicated issue. It really is. And you have to know about zoning and architecture. And that also applies to these large homes, the so-called McMansions. And that's another issue as well. So those are the kinds of things that will affect the village and that have affected the village, and not in a positive way.
No, small houses being torn down and palaces being built. It's been going on for a while.
Yes, yes, it has.
Okay, you made it through them all.
Any other questions?
Thank you, everybody, for watching, staying on. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you very much for organizing this.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. And next week, we'll be back, same time, same place, 2 new candidates.
Yes,
Looking
Don
forward.
O'Brien and Terry Deegan will be on.
that's it.
Very good.
All
Looking
right.
forward to it.
Thank you, everyone.
Everyone.
Have a
Bye-bye.
good evening.
Thank you,
Thank you.
John. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Mary.
Thank you.
Thanks for putting it together.